about 10, 15 minutes before Monday's show, we started to get the reporting about what was the big news on Tuesday. That is the settlement of all of the litigation between the Atlantic Coast Conference, Florida State, and Clemson. They are dropping the lawsuits and agreeing to a new revenue distribution model and agreeing to new withdrawal penalty fees, which are much lessened and drop after 2030. We tried to, survey as best as we can, what was coming across our desk as we went live. Now with a little bit of time to digest it, some hard numbers that we actually have coming out of Florida State and Clemson as they had to, pitch this to their own university leaders to be able to get all of the I's dotted and T's crossed. I'll let billable hours start here, Bud. What did you find interesting as we learned more about this from the last time we chatted on Monday?
It was like an FSU and Clemson's like fan fantasy ended up being like right as far as how much they extracted from this. I was pretty shocked that they were able to get what they got in terms of the revenue concessions in the now and also the cost savings for the exit fee, which also now fully includes the grant of rights in the future. I mean, you're looking at somewhere between like $250,000,000 to $250 million to $500 million in savings in terms of rights fees. If you look at what the estimates were by Florida State and I think by Clemson as well, and I mean you'd have to do like the discount value of that, but still like it's probably pretty factual to say that they're saving $250 million with this deal, and the fact that the exit fee actually drops to 75. So if you're one of the high earners, you're going to be pulling over the next 6 years somewhere between 60 and 75 million, right? Or well, more actually, like 90, because 15 times 6, right? We should probably do some math here. So they're like, you got all the other schools to basically pay you, like, hey, FSU and Clemson, put it away, right? And then you'll be able to pay this reduced buyout in 2030, 75 million, although it'll probably happen earlier if I had to guess. At that point, you finance a little bit larger amount, and then you jump. Like that's pretty wild. And I think the why is interesting. Like clearly the ACC thought that they had a much better chance to win this than they did at one time. Otherwise, they would have acquiesced to basically the very basic asks of FSU and Clemson at Amelia Island in March of 2023, right? When they said, hey, we can't earn 17% of the conference's revenue and receive only 7%. Like that's not sustainable in the long term. We need to have more of like a meritocracy type approach here. They got a lot more than they asked for 2 years ago. What they didn't get was out of the conference right now, which may be a blessing in disguise if you're able to create a bidding war come 2030-ish.
I mean, there's no appetite to expand right now. We have not heard we have not heard any source reporting that the SEC or the Big Ten on any level is looking to expand beyond what they have anytime soon. So I don't know. Tom, you look like you're about to say something right there. I don't want to hijack this one.
I was just going to say essentially, and maybe I'm wrong, so correct me if I am, but the ACC bought itself time.
Yes.
It bought itself time to put together a contingency plan. It didn't want to be caught in the same spot that the Pac-12 was, where it just completely dissolved seemingly overnight, and then they were just left sitting there with Washington State and Oregon State like, what the hell are we going to do? So by doing this, it's greasing the skids further for Florida State and Clemson and maybe other schools to find new homes and leave in the next round when it does come and when it does happen. But it also gives them time for their remaining members to kind of plan for their future and also for the league to plan for its future, to try to maybe send out some feelers to schools and other leagues to be like, all right, we're going to need some of these replacements lined up.
Completely. I think that's an undervalued aspect, because I was going through the whys and I was talking to different sources on this, and they're like, okay, on the ACC side, clearly there's not a lot of appetite for them to be deposed over the Swafford Raycom stuff and over maybe like how the network for the ACC network came to be. Like that touched some nerves in Tobacco Road, and I don't think they ever wanted that stuff to get more public than FSU made it in the initial filings. I think there's like real appetite to not have that happen. But that only really extends to like the league office. Other schools in the league don't care about that as much, up until the extent of if they actually could prove like serious mismanagement, then FSU and Clemson walk scot-free, and then they care a whole hell of a lot. So there is some kind of shared interest in not having this thing, proceed, especially once the Florida Supreme Court ruled that it can continue in the state of Florida. Like they were not going to get the home field advantage only of having it heard in North Carolina, at least not in the immediate time frame. So I thought that was interesting.
Hold on, real quick. Legally, all we got to was a venue fight. Like,
right.
We never.
I think they were scared of the summary judgment stuff coming up too.
Yeah, we never actually got to the point where anything was deposed. We never got to like the full exposure of documents. Like Florida State was able to give us an insight into a lot of different things that we didn't even know about through this process, like the February 2025 opt-in clause, which then became a whole news item. But, like we still never got to far enough down in the legal proceedings to say who had a leg up one way or the other. And so for the ACC, I mean, they just, whether it's one thing they did or didn't want to come to light, there's just the uncertainty of what are you going to get in Leon County and what's going to happen if all of a sudden you do get a bad ruling based on a certain judge. And then all of a sudden you have lost literally hundreds of millions of dollars, because guess what? Let's say 4 schools walk in 2030. That's $300 million for the rest of the schools that are still there to be able to divide amongst themselves and figure out how to move forward.
And the key word you said was still there. The schools will still be there in 2030. The people who run those schools may or may not be. And schools don't make these decisions. People do. So this is definitely a bit of kicking the can down the road from Jim Phillips, from the ACC presidents. Like Phillips may not be the ACC commissioner in 5 years. He might be, sure. But like these things turn over pretty frequently. So do university presidents. You don't usually have a university president who's there for 30 years. So if I'm an administrator running a school or a conference, I don't really want that on my hands. Like, hey, man, I made the call to be a hard no on this vote that ended up making my school become Washington State or Oregon State immediately, because we decided to go to the mat and fight this legal fight, and we lost. And now our value is basically equivalent to like a CUSA school. Basically it's replacement value, whatever. So I think there's some real like protectionism of the administrators here. Like that's a real thing. I think FSU and Clemson were absolutely banking on that. Like, do you guys really have the balls to fight this thing out? Because there's a lot more for the ACC to lose than there is for FSU and Clemson if you did like take this thing full term and you lost. The ESPN bits here is interesting too, right? Because this thing was settled, it was never adjudicated on the merits. So we're not really able to say that the GOR was not ironclad or that it would not have held up. Although
please don't say the word ironclad. I'm banning the word ironclad.
I made sure.
I'm sick of ironclad. No. You can be clad and you can have iron, and it is important to have in your. We are not. Nothing is ironclad. It's canceled. Ironclad. Cancel culture's back. Okay, ironclad is canceled.
I think like ESPN, and of course it's a settlement, so you won't really know, but like they clearly have an interest in this thing not going full term as well, because if it did, and Clemson won or FSU won or both, and they got out, a GOR not being enforceable the way it's written, I guarantee ESPN writes most of these the same way with its conference deals. That not being enforceable is a really big deal. The ACC's kind of small potatoes compared to another conference that they have a GOR with, right? So I'm not saying ESPN made them settle this, but ESPN's an interested party, and I think I'd be very interested if anybody thought that ESPN believed they should fight this, because I don't think there's like an actual argument, to the counter.
DK, yeah, what's your thought here?
Talked out of this, but I will say this, because I do. So it sounds to me, percentage-wise, Florida State, Clemson, the ACC in 2030 or beyond is what? 5% or less?
I mean, yeah, like I've got another leg. I've got another branch to this conversation. I was going to wait for a little bit to
start painting the Big Ten logo on the field now.
Well, what if it works out pretty well for them? What if they do pretty well, get access to the playoffs with an easier schedule, and they're collecting more money than everybody else? They're able to stay competitive on the big stage and compete with the teams in the SEC and Big Ten. Does it ever get to a point where it's attractive to stay?
Yes.
Yeah, like if they get 2 auto bids, you can financially, I think it could be feasible. But it's to me as a fan, it's not a real league anymore, because then it's really just Clemson, Miami, and Florida State every season, because they're all getting more money than everybody else competing for 2 spots. It's a 3-team league.
It's always been a 3-team league in terms of the revenue. Now they're just supporting those teams with the hope that they continue to be good, or in FSU's case, not go 2-10 and get back, to what they were the year before they went 2-10.
Yeah, but as a college football fan, nobody's tuning in rooting for teams to make more money. It's just win games.
Chip, you think there's a real chance?
Oh, I just think that, everyone's eyeing like they're going to be out the door. They're going to be out the door. Like you're going to go to the Big Ten. You're going to go to the SEC. And my other thought here is, what if you had spent or financed through private equity $100 million or $150 million to buy your way out, and then every conference ceases to exist in 32?
Right.
Now, what have you spent all this money on to buy yourself out? And you talk about kicking the can down the road, and all these administrators that might not want to like have something on their hands. Like, what if the Super League really is here? What if football entirely breaks apart from everything, and the only reasons conferences exist is to be able to organize your men's soccer schedule? I just think that there's a win here for Florida State and Clemson in that you're not just breaking out the door, trying to create a bidding war for the old reality when the new reality could be coming. And based on when a lot of these media rights deals are up, could be coming here around that 2030 time. So what you've done, if you're Florida State and Clemson, is you might just stay in the ACC, but now at least you have like very, very set terms. You have cost certainty of what it would cost to leave for a Super League, for a new conference that doesn't even exist yet, for the Big Ten, for the SEC, for whatever. And then, like, if you're the ACC, you understand that if there is a Super League, you're probably going to lose some of those. You're going to lose 5 or 6 schools anyway if there is a college football Super League, and you were going to have about 10 schools that probably were not going to either be picked or choose to engage with whatever that college football Super League is going to be.
I think the one factor that is going to become more important here is if the SEC goes to a 9-game schedule, I think you're going to have a lot of jealousy from FSU and Clemson fans and their administrators who are trying to sell tickets and get fans to travel to, relatively remote locations. Clemson's a little closer to major population centers than FSU is, but neither are super easy to get to. And you're trying to fill that stadium, and you look at it, and if you're an FSU fan, it's like, God dang, man, NC State is like our 3rd best home game of the year. And you look over what Florida's playing, if they go to a 9-game SEC schedule, that's not like, that's a hard thing to sell. You got to drive double the distance to Tallahassee as you do Gainesville from a lot of spots to see a lot of opponents that, like, as a diehard college ball fan, I like watching them, but I guarantee you most FSU and Clemson fans think a lot of this schedule is just shitty, right? And like that is going to become a major factor. Like TVs aren't getting smaller or cheaper. I was looking at a 98-inch the other day for $870. I was like, damn, like this is like the home experience is only getting better. Having good quality, like regular season games matters. And I think that's going to be a real driving force.
Here, the other piece of this, which I guess sort of ties into the Super League, Jim actually brought it up this morning. He said, what do y'all think would happen if the top schools in the SEC and Big Ten decide that they deserve more money than schools like Mississippi State and Purdue? Is this precedent setting? Because, it's not precedent. This is not precedent setting because we've had unequal revenue distribution.
Texas did it.
Yeah, we've had unequal revenue distribution before. And guess what happened? In both the times when the conference caved, the schools that they were caving to still ended up leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, will we see this? That's the question. Will the SEC and Big Ten hit a point where they entertain unequal revenue distribution based on your value to the media rights deal?
No. For 2 reasons. One, I think that they lack leverage in terms of where are you really going to go right now. Okay. Like, do I think FSU would have gotten a full share or Clemson a full share had they gotten out scot-free? No. I think they would have had to probably take a pretty bad deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, part of why they were engaging private equity. I do think the Big Ten would have actually taken them, but I think they would have put the screws to them as far as the terms of any kind of deal. I don't think a full share was on deck for them. But
I mean, it is funny that UCLA is getting a full share and Oregon is not.
Right. Exactly. I mean, leverage matters.
What if the NFL comes to Ohio State and says, we want you to replace the Cleveland Browns?
That's the thing, right?
The 33rd team.
Yeah.
But I
North Carolina.
see,
That's North Carolina. Come on.
Yeah.
you could see leverage being gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or sorry, like you could see invites to whatever's next getting lost in the mail. I think that's probably how it happens. Like, I don't think all of a sudden you're going to see an SEC, where Vandy and Mississippi State take a 2% or 3% share.
I don't think that scenario is plausible in the immediate future, but I do think that maybe 20 years from now,
Sure.
when the Big Ten and the SEC are the power two, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, what if we just merged our best teams and formed one giant super league? Then you could see that happening to where the schools like the Purdue's and the Mississippi States and the guys who aren't generating that same kind of income get left behind as a new league is formed.
If you're Petiti and you have a bunch of really, really, really competitive teams, but not anybody who can recruit well enough to compete in the playoff, do you look at one of these teams you think is going to become a free agent? Say, hey, like, we have great games week to week, but we don't have that team that anybody with the brain really believes can win in the playoff. Do you make some kind of rainmaker offer for one of them?
Are you talking about
Bud saying, do you come in for Florida State?
The Big 12 guy.
Yormark. I was about to say,
Yormark,
Bud,
yeah.
Big Ten had 2 semifinals.
Not Petiti, excuse me. I got Petiti on the brain.
Listen,
Bud, did you not realize Illinois has a top 5 class right now?
That's true, they do.
I know.
You're talking about Big 12. Does Yormark look at it? I mean, if Yormark is the Big 12 is also up around that time, you know, Yormark's probably going to be looking at a couple of years of the college football playoff of, you know, not having those teams at the very, very top. I mean, heck, I was doing just like a sketch of how I imagine the tiers of the college football world for the 2025 season, just my very first one. And I just said Big 12 champ TBD. And I put them on the same level as Michigan and Miami. Like in my tier maker, I didn't actually use tier maker, but like I was like, okay, so these 8 teams I'm going to put in the top tier. And then my next one, we've got like a Michigan, Miami, Big 12 champ TBD. And like whoever comes out on top, sure. Good job out there. Go get them, boss. Maybe you can, I mean, Arizona State showed you can come real daggum close to making some noise, but I don't think there's one program that you can confidently say in that conference right now is going to be like leading the charge in the college football world.
All right, last thing that I have on this, and I wanted to save this and bring it up to you guys. So I think there's like different teams you got to vote with a carrot and different teams you got to vote with a stick, right? For some of them, I think the fear of becoming Washington State or Oregon State is pretty real, but some of them have enough juice to where like that's not a real fear. Mm-hmm. And some of those are like basketball related schools. So they clearly had to make basketball a certain percentage of this, you know, revenue pie, like the ratings revenue pie. Combining it with football wouldn't really make any sense because basketball is such a drop in the bucket compared to football, right? You could be the number 1 basketball rated team and still be behind like 7 or 8 football rating teams. So that doesn't make sense with how I think they would pay it out. So does that mean that they have a separate pool for basketball and football? And if so, if you're Duke, what is your incentive to put any money behind football? If you're Florida State and you're in a basketball coaching search, why would you spend any money on basketball knowing you can't really compete in this league with the amount that some of these teams are spending in NIL on hoops? Like, why would I not go throw that at a baseball program that's already running and just say, we're just going to punt basketball for the next 5 years? I'm curious as to how they structure this pot of money. Because I think to keep Duke and Carolina and maybe some of the other basketball schools that voted yes on this deal, to keep them happy, you probably have to keep the pool separate, right? I mean, if you know you can't compete in that, they're only going to pay out a couple spots. I mean, FSU could finish 5th in hoops and get nothing bonus-wise. Why am I throwing any money at hoops? We suck.
Well, see, and then you're jealous of Clemson because guess what? Clemson just won the ACC championship, made it to the college football playoff, and they've got a team that's going to the NCAA tournament and is like, I don't know, made it to the Sweet 16 last year. They could do it again. You know, like Clemson's actually the team that is going to check all these boxes right now, or the school that is going to check all these boxes.
But do you think they're going to check it on ratings?
Yeah. I mean,
for basketball?
No.
ESPN just hyped Duke UNC like it was the Super Bowl. You know, like I bet you Clemson's basketball ratings suck compared to how good the team is.
That's true. I mean, I
don't know anything about this, but like I'm just guessing.
How long? We've seen coaches complain about time slots. We've seen fans complain about time slots. How long is it before you get a Brent Key or a Dave Doran or somebody complaining about a matchup versus 2 teams with better records, and meanwhile you could potentially have Florida State playing so-and-so that's worse, and they're like,
it was this year, Danny.
Yeah.
There was grumbling about it this year. It was Pitt and who? They got stuck on it. Was it Pitt Duke on ACC Network? They were both ranked.
Yes.
Mm.
And ESPN's like, we don't care. People don't want to watch you.
Right. But if there is money at stake, you don't think they're going to get even louder about it?
Great
to
call.
be like, hey, wait a
They
second.
will.
We're getting screwed in a system that's supposed to reward performance. We're better teams. We have a higher ranking, and you're burying us on the ACC network at noon when you're putting Florida State at 3:30 on ABC or Miami. There are going to be some complaints.
AC Network sucks so bad that people actually, it's not on Nielsen. Like you get 0
Right, they don't rank.
It's not like you get a bad rating. It's not even rated.
Yeah, it's rigged.
It's very rigged.
Yes.
You know what else is rigged? If Florida State and Miami and Clemson are playing more games against Notre Dame, do you think the football pot might be rigged?
Yeah. It's
again,
rigged.
This is all just buying time.
Yeah.
Like the prognosis has been given. Let's figure out what we can do in the meantime.
And to that point,
if they're separate basketball and football.
Quantrell knows, our friend says, Tom, who is more dead, the ACC or Cam Rising?
Cam Rising is dead. The ACC is dying.
Okay.
There's a difference.
All right.